Good morning, folks. Everything new under the sun. So, I like my creation evolution. I love the creation evolution debate. I think creation is awesome. It's a real faith builder for the Christian in this day and age, and it proves the beginning of the Bible. And if the beginning of the Bible is true, then likely the end of the Bible is true, which leads into Bible prophecy. So we know we can have faith and assurance that Bible prophecy will be fulfilled. And if Bible prophecy and creation are true, that means God and Jesus is true, and heaven and hell exist. And that is my understanding. That is what I believe is the truth. And it is the truth. There is no proof for evolution. They do not have any missing links. There's no empirical scientific evidence for evolution that exists today. It's all hypothesis, it's all guess, it's all story. This particular one, this is from ICR.org. Let me find my mouse there and center this on the screen. ICR is a great website, Institute for Creation Research, and these guys are PhDs here. And they found a new whale fossil. And so the title of this one is Whale Fossil Harpoons Evolution. So I just want to talk about it a bit because I like to present these because these are interesting. These are faith builders. These give you confidence that the Bible is accurate. God created the earth in about 6 days, and we have been on the earth for about 6,000 years, and time is coming to a close. And so you need to share these things with others so that they understand that the Bible is accurate. According to the evolutionary mantra, whales evolved from dog-like land creatures. And as the whale of the tale goes, over millions of years, the size of the evolving creatures grew and finally resulted in the largest animals ever seen on Earth, the baleen whales. At least that's the way the myth went until a recent toothed, non-filter feeding whale fossil was found. So they find fossils in the ground, and these continue to confirm, in fact, that creation is the better understanding of the origins of the Earth. And evolution is not. Evolution can't explain this. Two evolutionists recently stated that Lanocetus denticranatus, supposedly the second oldest mysticete, forgive me if I'm saying that wrong, baleen whale known, lived 34 million years ago. And they're just making these numbers up. They're getting them from nowhere. Science does not give you millions of years. Science does not have a date stamped on things. Science does not say something is millions of years old. They can carbon date things and date things with rubidium, strontium, and all these whatever other particles. They can date them based on that. But those are fraught with errors, and they also are based on many assumptions, because we were not there millions of years ago to confirm decay rates, for example, and these sorts of things. And there's other errors related to them. But creationists maintain that God created whales only thousands of years ago. So there's a huge difference there. You would think this would be obvious if creation only occurred about 6,000 years ago versus what evolution is saying millions of years ago. You would think the difference would be obvious, and it is. Evolution has no scientific proof. They all make assumptions based on fossils they find and say, well, we think this is X, Y, Z, or they even don't say think, they just state them as scientific fact. But in fact, it's not observable and repeatable in the lab. And that's what good science has to be, observable and repeatable. That's the definition of empirical evidence. Evolution itself has no empirical evidence. Mysticetes appearing during the late Eocene, but evidence of their early evolution remains sparse and controversial, with several models competing to explain the origin of the baleen-based bulk feeding. Baleen is a keratinous structure attached to the upper jaw in some whales and is used to filter out water while feeding. Evolutionists see this unique arrangement of highly derived or apomorphic, meaning it's an evolutionary advanced character state. Baleen is certainly advanced. Baleen, in all its complexity, has always been baleen. Effectively, the idea is that there's no transitional state or fossil or anything that indicates that the baleen, the straining of the water, came from some other lower life form. No evidence of it having been evolved from something else has ever been found. So they make assumptions about this, but they never find evidence that any transitional fossil existed. There's no evidence of creatures evolving things. Evolutionists counter with the creature called Ateocetus, suggesting that the extinct genus somehow possessed both teeth and baleen, which is that I guess a fleshy gill-like structure or whatever that would filter water and animals out of the water. The presence of baleen in Ateocetus fossils can only be inferred because there's no fossil evidence of that. That is not preserved. That's a fleshy sort of thing. It's not a bone, so it's not preserved in the supposed fossil record. I say that because there is no fossil record. The fossils are just in the ground. They don't record anything. All that you know about a fossil is that it died, and it was the fossil basically had minerals not injected into it, but seeped into it, which replaced the original bone with the fossil. And that's all you know. You can't tell that thing lived, for how long that thing lived, or what it ate, etc., because it's all minerals now. That's what a fossil is. So they're making assumptions about, they're inferring their ideas about the fossils they find and assuming the presence of baleen. Michael Benton's 2015 edition of Vertebrate Paleontology does not mention this supposed crucial transition at all. The authors presuppose evolution and unfortunately force this interpretation on Lanocetus, saying that it had well-developed gums, whatever that means, but no baleen. But if it had no baleen, why call it mysticete a baleen whale in the first place? So they're making assumptions. They're just calling something baleen when it's not. They don't have no proof. They're just making assumptions because their worldview is that evolution had to have occurred, so they're trying to explain it based on their worldview that evolution is true. Well, if evolution is only a theory, if it's not true at all, they're not considering that fact, which is it's mind-boggling that they don't even consider anything outside of evolution because they were taught that evolution is fact. In fact, it's not. The fact is that evolution is not confirmed by science at all. There's no scientific evidence that suggests that evolution is true. There's change within a kind of animal. You have big dogs and little dogs, but you don't have dogs turning into snakes, etc. We don't see these things. We see malformations, an extra arm or a loss of a leg, but those animals don't last very long in the wild. So that's not evolution. We don't see evolution occurring in the wild. The best interpretation, each whale kind was created unique and did not evolve in some mythical man-made progression as evolutionists portray. And that's absolutely true. The best interpretation of this fossil is that the carcass of this poor hapless toothed whale was buried catastrophically in late global flood sediments. So the flood really makes sense to explain a whole number of the fossils that they claim is evidence for evolution. The reason that this fossil appears suddenly and out of order according to evolutionary expectations, so it already doesn't follow the evolutionary expectation, is that each whale kind was created unique and did not evolve in some mythical man-made progression as evolutionists portray. Baleen whales have always been baleen. God created them as a kind of animal, and he did not create them as a toothed whale, for example. Toothed whales have always had teeth, so he created the different kinds, and there was no evolutionary progression, and anything that they present in terms of fossils is always just assuming stuff, guessing on top of what the evidence actually is, that they have a fossil in their hand. They can't tell that it was baleen. They can't tell that it's a transitional fossil. They can't tell that it had any children, as Kent Hovind likes to say. They can't tell anything about it other than it's a fossil in the dirt. They can't even date it because the original structure isn't there. The original bone isn't there. It's replaced with minerals. So they can't date the fossil. So how are they dating the fossil? They're making assumptions about the date of the fossil by which layer it is in, but they assume that multiple layers were not laid down all at once like the flood would do. And they're establishing dates based on the layers, based on the key fossils that they find in the layers, which is absolutely bogus. I mean, there's a ton of stuff on this by Ken Hovind that you can follow. Check him out. I still believe he is pretty much the world-leading creationist. Personal thoughts aside about his life, etc., you can pick holes in him if you want. You can say he went to jail. That doesn't discredit his creation research and his that he's a force in the creation spectrum. If someone is winning people over for the Lord by way of creation, don't you think the devil wants to do everything he can to make that guy look bad? The devil has done everything he can. I believe he's like a modern day Job. It makes sense to me because he was winning so many people over to the Lord. He wasn't some millionaire. He wasn't some televangelist buying private jets. He went to jail for structuring because he was using cash in amounts less than $10,000, which was below the legal level. The law was that you couldn't deal in cash over $10,000 without paperwork. He was not dealing in cash over $10,000. So, I mean, the complaints against him are bogus. You could have many other complaints about him, regardless of the man, and everybody's a sinner. He is a sinner included. I think his creation is excellent, and definitely check him out. Go to drdino.com. You can find out resources related to creation. There's other great creation ministries as well. Creationministries.com. Creation.com, I believe, is the creation ministries. There's other speakers and organizations that do the same thing that you may feel are, quote, safer to invite into your church. But I still support Ken Johnson. Ken Johnson's great. I love Ken Johnson. I still support Ken Hovind, even with all his sin. I mean, you look at anybody else, Ken Johnson, since I mentioned him. I mean, he's a sinner too. You mentioned Creation Ministries or ICR.org. All the people behind these articles are sinners. We're all sinners. We're all saved by the grace of God. So if something bad comes out about them, you don't just flush them down the toilet and say, oh, you've had one thing against you. I'm not trusting in you anymore. That's not fair. That's not the Christian attitude. That's not the Christian way. These people make mistakes. But the content, what they do is important. And I think things like this need to get out there. We need to get this out to all our non-Christian friends. And get them to places like ICR.org, get them to places like creation.com, Answers in Genesis, Ken Ham, for example. These are all great resources for your church. So get these in there. If you don't like Ken Hovind, that's fine, but check out some of these other guys. These are all great resources which really build your faith. And if the foundation of the Bible is true, the Genesis account, then you can have faith that Jesus did rise from the dead and that the end times are upon us. And they are. I'll leave it there, guys. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you guys in the next video.